know somebody who should be there but it's not here, please let them know that they should be in webinar. If I have both Zoom and webinar at the same time, I hope it's kind of works this way. So we are going to have a lecture. I just forgot already how to use this thing. I think I can manage. Right. Last time we talked about fertility. We talked about health a bit. This is kind of done. Now we can start thinking about other things that development, or better say lack of development, causes. Like it's inequality. Inequality is kind of like we know it's a bad thing due to number of reasons. Like we believe it's not cool when inequality is high. Now we'll discuss it a bit more, and we basically can imagine, and we know that if where you can see poverty, you can see inequality. Like there are many reasons for that, and also you cannot say for sure what's first and what's the second. So like what's cause and what's an effect. This is kind of not what we can say for sure, and moreover, probably we don't even have to know what it is, because we just said right, it's kind of, it just happens this way, and we just have to accept the fact and see what can be done about it to kind of to solve the situation a bit. All right, let's start. So, sorry, I forgot how to. Sorry. No. Yes. All right. It was just slow. So Clausen says that if you want to define inequality, you should think about this as the uneven distribution of some resource, that is, people having different amount of something. Yeah, that's it. Period. So if somebody has more of some resource, that's inequality. Yeah, that's kind of not a very surprising definition. And at the same time, we see it doesn't have only to be about income. Yeah, it could also be well referred to, say, health. All right. Oh, by the way, like it's, sorry for stopping in the middle. Like there is a format files which is called PDF. Most of you know about it, but some of you kind of struggles to accept this fact that there is PDF format, portable document format. So please send your files in this format, in the PDF. If you have sent it in the wrong one, all right, you cannot do anything about it. Let's keep it like this. But remember, for the future, people will like you more if you use PDFs to send some kind of ready documents, please do so. For the last assignment, it actually has to be not a PDF, it will be like a text file, but I had to express my concerns. PDFs are cool, other types of files are not. So that's the morale. Coming back to the inequality. So inequality is the uneven distribution of resources, and here we don't even have to stay with income only. Yeah, like it's not only income, it could also be something like say health or political rights or what else is there? So many other types of resources which are valuable to us. That's another thing to consider. Of course, it's always easy to start with income because income is something that we can easily measure. Income is correlated with many things, so income is a nice proxy for development, as we already kind of established in this course. Why should we care about it? Yeah, why is it important? Well, I'll start with the third bullet here. Yeah, like it's quite likely to be unfair. Quite likely means that like not necessarily. So sometimes, so for example, income inequality in a kind of given in an appropriate limit is fine. Yeah. So for example, if you're super talented, if you work hard, and if you kind of can apply talents this way that allows you to get a higher income, especially income higher than somebody without your talents has, maybe that's kind of all right. That's kind of not bad. This is your money, your talent, so you kind of deserve it. However, most of cases, this is not what happens. And quite often, yeah, like inequality is the result of some unfair distribution. So yeah, like sometimes, so for example, let's consider Africa about inequality, even though we know that like inequality is something what we are kind of more familiar with. Yeah, so for example, we are not maybe so familiar with poverty, like with this super deep poverty, but we are definitely familiar with inequality. Let's imagine right now we have an African country where one in Africa still like sometimes this ethnicity and ethnical kind of unity plays a big role. So imagine that like in some places, some ethnicities gained access to natural resources, so they can dig diamonds, and then let anyone from your country, it's the same country, but just like ethnicities that were like not as efficient in occupying these land grants. Maybe these people are kind of more well off because they control resources, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's fair. Yeah, like they just came, took it, even though it's kind of nationally belongs to the whole nation. But once they occupy it, they of course like try not to leave the mine, yeah, like not to lose the grip of the resources, and that's why they like kind of start oppressing others. This is about unfairness. Coming back to the now first bullet, is inequality in university regarded as something unfair? Yeah. So like it's the I think inequality is like there must be an extent to what inequality is fair or not. Yeah, like that's why I say like it's very likely to be unfair. Oh, not always. Yeah, like sometimes if it's your talent, that's kind of good. Yeah, like in the US, it's not only about your talent, it's also about the talent of your ancestors. Yeah, because this social mobility in the US is not very high. Like it happens. Like, so if you're born poor, you can become rich. However, it's kind of harder for you to become rich if, for example, education, yeah, like the college education is not for free. Yeah, like imagine that you are not the like super brilliant student, but you are not dumb. Yeah, like you're just like a normal average student. It's quite likely that if you're not super kind of superstar of education, you can get hard time getting a scholarship. Maybe you won't get a scholarship because all the scholarships are taken by the American football players. Yeah, so and you cannot go to college, and that's why you can't fully reveal your potential. Well, somebody who is like has the same abilities as your parents, oh sorry, as you, but kind of richer parents can afford college because parents can pay. Yeah, like is it fair then or not? That's different question. Yeah, like and again, like fair and unfair is like only like a kind of an attribute. Um, yeah, it's an attribute that we put it on it, and we kind of then it's the question: what can we do about it, or should we do something about it? Yeah, like sometimes it's also like what I think. If we're talking about resources, this is a good example of inequality which could be unfair. Yeah, like these people could be lucky or they could violate law. For example, it's also like happens quite often. Yeah, like they were just they broke the law and then they said, all right, we just become kind of the lords of this country. Um, the why is it bad in other cases? Yeah, like besides this kind of moral argument, it reduces investments. So like you have less people investing. Yeah, like you have less people owing capital, and it of course discourages economic activity. The same example I gave you about these college students in the US. So maybe these people would be a very good addition to some like engineering position. Yeah, like like sometimes in engineering, you don't have to be you don't have to revolutionize something. You just have to like work long, hard on some design, and then it also like it kind of also a development of the whole kind of industry. Yeah, like you don't have to make any breakthroughs. Um, and another thing is, of course, inequality undermines social stability. Yeah, because people sometimes think about it as if they perceive it as unfair, sometimes they want to change it. Yeah, and then there is the question: what can be done? What can these people do? Sometimes the consequences are quite tragic. Yeah, like if you consider this case of Rwanda, yeah, like I guess you heard about Rwanda in the 90s. So like no, before 90s, it was a Belgic colony. Yeah, like Belgium had colonies in Africa, and when Belgians came to Rwanda, they said like, all right, we need people to work in the fields, and we want I think they were growing sugar or something. So basically, as slaves, but somebody had to supervise these slaves, and they said like, all right, we have two types of two ethnicities in this country, and then they said like, all right, one is Hutu, another is Tutsi. One is a farmer. One tribe was farmers, another tribe was hunters. So of course they took ones that were farmers to farm. This is easier, and the hunters were kind of used as supervisors. Yeah, like I don't know if you can call them supervisors. in this context? Well, they were basically used to oppress another thing. Yeah, like I think the hunters were Hutu. No, hunters were Tutsi, I think, and farmers were Hutu. I kind of forgot which one was what. However, it doesn't matter because later, when there's like kind of becoming more and more civilized, these people from this supervising tribe started becoming like members of administration. Yeah, like so their social status was kind of getting better and better. And at some point, when Belgians left already the country, there started clashes. Yeah, that like the whole administration was Tutsi, I think Tutsi, and the Hutus were not very happy about it. And then at some point, like the level of tension in the country was like that high that they decided, all right, we organize a civil war, and I think 1 million people were killed. Yeah, out of population of like maybe 10 million. So this was like a whole like tragedy of country, like of how kind of people from the same country could be super violent against each other. So it was like a terrible thing. Why did it happen? It happened because there was like a very severe inequality in this country. And one group couldn't tolerate it anymore. And another thing, last thing here, why inequality is bad, it's simply economically not optimal. If you think about, imagine, now you can close your eyes, yeah, and visualize a utility curve, a normal utility curve. So like on the x-axis you have goods, on the y-axis you have utility. Normally we imagine something increasing but at a decreasing rate. Yeah, so like normal utility functions, so like log function, for example. And then we see that at some point, our utility becomes very not sensitive to further increases in income. Yeah, so and then probably it makes sense to distribute this money, which people don't really get, which they don't really feel. Maybe it makes sense to distribute it to other people who are poor, who actually feel kind of happy about it because I don't know, they cannot find food and now they can eat and eat properly, and so on. So there are studies that show that, for example, in developed countries, income above $80,000 per year, which is quite high, yeah, like it's very high. But above this amount, people already start feeling happier if the income increases. Yes, like 80,000 roughly is kind of a borderline, and above this, you don't really care if you have more money or not. And so if somebody has like billions, maybe this person will be equally happy with millions. Yeah, and you remember that billion is 1,000 times, a billion is 1,000 times million. Yeah, so it's kind of a lot. And then there maybe like we need some redistribution mechanisms to increase this also economic efficiency of the whole process. Right. How do we measure inequality? We need to find some, you remember, every time we talk about something, we need some indicators. Yeah, this whole course is about indicators. So if you want to understand how severe, like how prevalent inequality is, we need to kind of design some indicator, some proxy, and kind of researchers established that a good proxy of inequality has to fulfill these 4 properties: anonymity, population independence, scale invariance, and this transfer property. All right, what it all means, we'll learn now. We can just go one by one. And these are kind of general principles. They're super logical, and they don't really determine a particular indicator. They just tell you that probably it makes sense that the indicator of inequality fulfills one of these four parameters. Sorry, not one of these four, all of these four properties. All right. Now we can start with anonymity. So basically, anonymity is the real anonymity principle. So we don't care who receives income. So each individual has the same importance. So it doesn't matter if it's Hutu or Tutsi. Yeah, it doesn't matter if what age the person is, what kind of ethnical background he has. It only matters if he is poor or not, or like his level of income. So it's it's a very simple and very kind of primitive principle, which only tells us that a good inequality indicator kind of doesn't focus on particular groups, unless it has some kind of conceptual reason to do so. So, for example, if people say that like, oh, we are the kind of, we get less income just because we are we belong to a particular, I don't know, ethnic group, it has to be checked if it's really like this, and we actually shouldn't care about the ethnicity. We should check, or we should care about the about the income level. That's what it means. However, it's only for individuals. So if we talk about households, that kind of, it's different, because for example, then we could say like how many people live in a household. Yeah, like, and then it actually starts to matter. Then we can't use the same. We cannot apply anonymity principle the same way as we would do this for individuals. So for individuals, we say like we apply kind of, we treat everybody equally. For households, probably not. For example, we need to weight households with more people higher, because simply it's kind of, they represent more people. All right. Next principle is the population independence. So what does population independence means? It means that we don't really care how many people are poor, for example, in our society as a whole. Yeah, we only care about relative numbers. Yeah, so like if we double our population, basically if we replicate our population, yeah, like, and we kind of make clones of everybody in our society with the same income, with the same opportunities, the inequality measure shouldn't change. Yeah, so like it doesn't really matter how many poor we have in absolute numbers. What we care about is relative numbers. Also, you see, like, very straightforward principle. It's even like weird. Why do we mention it? All right, scale invariance. Scale invariance shows that the units of measure do not matter. So if we apply it to the US, for example, we would see that income there is also very unequally distributed. Even though like people are, there are some poor people, of course, but like in reality, it's not as many poor people as we would say like we can see in sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, so there we have still higher levels of income on average. So like we have lower poverty in the US. However, it doesn't make US less unequal country, because even though people, even poor people in the US are not as poor as in Africa, rich people in the US are way richer than rich people in Africa. So, and then it makes sense to compare people in relative terms. So like we compare poor of America with the rich people of America, and not poor people of America with poor people of Africa. That's not what we want. in a good inequality measure. Yeah, so that's why, for example, when people when we talk about inequality in Russia, yeah, like saying that like in Africa people are poor, it's not an argument. Yeah, because we care about inequality in this country, in this particular country, and we want to compare poor Russians with rich Russians. Yeah, and not with somebody who lives in Ukraine or Tajikistan or Africa. No, it's not what we are interested in. This is, if we do so, this is not a good inequality measure. And the final thing is called the transfer principle. Also, another thing is Pigou-Dalton principle. It's the same, and it's summarized in a very simple form, meaning that a transfer from richer to poorer, like from rich person to poor person, if nothing else changes in the economy, reduces inequality. Yeah, that's again super simple, super straightforward. However, not all kind of inequality measures have it. So basically, it tells us if we take money from people who are rich, who are kind of above the median, and give it to those who are below the median, we should expect that inequality kind of reduces because people become closer to each other in terms of income. If we do it the opposite way, if we transfer from poorer to richer, inequality should increase because then people become kind of even further apart in terms of their, let's say, income. This is the Pigou-Dalton principle. Yeah, so basically, if you take money from poor and give them to poor, this is not actually inequality reduced. Yeah, so maybe somebody will become less poor, but not because like the rich person got a bit less rich, but because somebody else got equally poor. This doesn't reduce inequality. What are the examples of these indicators? We can have like very, very simple concentration indicators, because when we talk about inequality, we actually think about concentration of resources. Yeah, so like that's why we use these concentration indicators. And the simple thing is these percentage ratios. So for example, we can say like how much of income is received by a particular share of population. Yeah, so for example, we know that we can say that our top 20% of population earn 60% of total income. So it tells us that like our 1/5 of our population, so like not a lot of people, earn 60% of the whole income. So basically saying that like the rest of the country, so like 80% of the country, enjoys only 40% of total income. Yeah, that's one way to see this. We could also, this focuses only, as I said, like only in the upper part of the distribution. Also, it can be done the opposite on the lower part of distribution. We could just like say like the lowest 1% of population earns like, let's say lowest 10% of population earn only like 1% of total income, for example. To fix it, we can have this ratio of top percent to bottom to bottom percent. Like, for example, top 10% and bottom 10%. And what's the kind of the ratio of incomes between them? So, for example, in Russia, I think like top 10% earn, I would say like definitely 100 times more than the bottom 10%. Yeah, quite like. However, this doesn't ignore the middle, because we know that, like, for example, imagine that we have like, as I told you, like upper 10% are like 100 times richer than the bottom 10%. Is it bad or is it fine? We cannot say for sure because we have to see where the middle is. Because imagine if the middle is actually very equally spread between these two kind of top and bottom groups. Then maybe it's not so bad. Maybe then it's just this lowest 10% of distribution are just, they just don't have like kind of talents enough to achieve something, but we see like that the whole society is kind of not as skewed to the bottom, kind of more or less equal. However, if we see that the middle is also like super below the top group, then maybe it's kind of a bad sign, as it shows us that inequality is really high. So we can come up with something more sophisticated, and this is what the Lorentz curve is for. And this is a super cool to see on the graph. So it's a graph just showing the proportion of overall income or wealth, which kind of goes to the bottom X percentage of people. Yeah, so, and the perfect inequality here is the straight line. So basically it tells us that like, then income is called, it's kind of distributed uniformly. Yeah, so like each level of income is kind of received by the same amount of people. So it doesn't mean that, like, for example, for perfect inequality, yeah, like we don't say that everybody has to earn the same. No, it's for perfect equality. No, it's not about this distribution looking in a particular way. It's quite hard to explain it verbally. So let's go to the graph. Yes, like we can see, this is what Lorentz curve is. Sorry, here it's perfect equality, not inequality. Check. Fix it. So it's perfect equality, but it's good. Like now you can see it. Right. What does this Lorentz curve show us? So it tells us. You remember from our tutorials about this cumulative share of population. So we know that at some point 100% is reached. So here, for example, we would say, let's say in the middle, somewhere here, would say like that 50. Yes, perfect inequality would be one person owing everything, and the rest has nothing. And that's what we can see with this Lorentz curve. Yeah. So basically here we see like, right? You don't see my pointer. Right now. All right. Thank you for letting me know. Do you see it now? Weird big thing. All right. So we would say here. No, maybe here. Yeah, like somewhere here we have 50% of our population. Yeah, like cumulative share. That means that like the kind of poorest half of our nation, somewhere here, the poorest half, this poorest half of our nation earns only, what share is it? Maybe it is something like 10-15%. Yeah, so this shows us exactly, we can infer these ratios, yeah, like how much income each kind of group collects from this graph. So for example, if you want to say something about the richest people, we say like, all right, we take the 10 richest percent, so like it's between this point and the end of axis, so like from here to here. This is what our richest 10% get. And we see like that This is the distance between this point, so like opposite of the O, and the total. Yeah, so it tells us that, all right, our richest 10% earn, let's say, 1/3 of total income. Yeah, well, 2/3, so like from here, from this point to here, this goes to the poorest 90% of population. Lorenz curve was above the line of equality. No, it's actually not possible to have Lorenz curve above the line of equality, because here it's already perfect equality, and the perfect equality means that means actually, yes, that we have it tells us that everybody earns actually the same, because then we could see that like if we look on this if we move along this line, let's imagine we are here in the middle. It tells us that 50% of our population have 50% of our income. 90% of our population have 90% of our income. 1% of our population has 1% of our income. So like, and then we can infer that like, everybody earns the same. However, this doesn't happen always, and we also don't expect that everybody earns the same. This is not feasible, and then maybe we should also like, this kills all the economic incentives. So people need opportunity to earn more than the others. Like if they have better talents, why not? All right, so but the Lorenz curve shows us how to see inequality. So like we know that like if Lorenz curve moves closer to the line of equality, we have a more equal country or like distribution. And if Lorenz curve moves to the origin, so here we have less equal country. And so like you remember this. So like no, remember these areas A and B for now. So it's the share of space here below the curve and between the curve and the line, because they are also needed, because now we're comparing it visually, and sometimes imagine that this curve can intersect. So sometimes here it's kind of nice and smooth. Or imagine that we have some distribution, like you have like somebody in the bottom who is very oppressed, like they don't get any income. So like 10% of your population don't get any income. So then the line is kind of moving here. And then after this, it's like something like not perfect equality, but like rather equal distribution of the rest. So this is one example. Another example is again, everybody is super oppressed. And then the top 10, so like then you have like this line going to here. And then at some point, the rest goes to the richest, like 10% of population. That's another thing. So to have it kind of not only visually compared, but also in terms of numbers, we can create the Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient is simply this A part divided by A plus B. So what share of space does this A, the gray thing, has relative to the whole triangle? So A plus B. So this is our Gini coefficient. Alternatively, this Gini coefficient could be calculated according to this formula. So what does this formula tell us? So we take individual of each individual. We take income of each individual and compare it with all other incomes in our distribution. So basically, we calculate these distances between individual I and individual J in terms of income. We take only value of this, so we ignore the sign. So these are like the module brackets, yeah. We take only the distance without any sign, and we divide it by this mean income, so by an average income, and population size squared. Yeah, and then we sum it for all pairs of I and j. And so like then we get the real Gini coefficient. So this is the formula. I see it's quite easy. You just have to know how to. Yeah, you just have to apply it. There are some pros and cons of Gini coefficient. The good thing is that it's super easy to compute if you have data. That's a big if, but yeah, like you remember from the tutorial now, yeah, that we don't need maybe to collect data about the whole nation. We can just have some selection, and based on this selection, we can make some inferences about inequality in our sample, in our whole population. It's easy to compare. Yeah, like if Gini is, for example, with Lorentz curves, I told you like if they intersect, so like if one goes like from here to here and then here, it's very hard to compare because we cannot compare those things. Like we don't see which one has more space above the curve, below the curve, and which has less. Gini allows us to compare it. And another kind of good thing, it's not always an advantage. However, for some cases, it's kind of nice that it puts highest weight on the middle. Yeah, so like on the middle, meaning that we care about the kind of an average person in the data sample, and not so much about the extremes like to the top or to the bottom, which is, in some cases, it's a good thing. In some cases, it's kind of, we want more, for example, more value on the poor. That's why we'll see other types of income measures. The disadvantages are that it requires a lot of individual data. However, yeah, like this is more or less with every income measure or every inequality measure, you need to get individual data. So it's kind of disadvantage, but maybe it's not so bad. Another thing is not decomposable. So we cannot, if we say like, if we look on this number, we cannot say, for example, which group contributes a lot. So for example, remember we had this example of Rwanda. People have two big ethnic groups, Hutus and Tutsis. We see that inequality by Gini coefficient is kind of high. And then we want to understand if it's between group, so between Hutus and Tutsis, or it's within groups. Because then it's kind of, it matters, yeah? Like, because for example, if it's between groups, that's kind of a serious thing, yeah? Like then it means that like one tribe is systematically oppressed by another. Yeah, that is what could happen. Another case would be like if both groups are equally poor and all the inequality happens within groups. So like basically out of both tribes, you have somebody super rich and somebody super poor. And then maybe it's not such a bad thing, at least for this kind of ethnical tension, because you can say like, all right, it's not that like your ethnicity makes you poor, it's something else. Yeah, then it's maybe not so much it doesn't give so much kind of motivation to this ethnical conflict. Yes, Gini is not decomposable, so with Gini we cannot find it. We cannot see where it comes from. That's why we have the Atkinson measures, and the Atkinson measure is a very kind of, it has a bit of philosophy behind. So because the idea, kind of the main idea of this whole class of indicators is that we want to compare utility of the whole nation compared to this actual situation, and we want to compare it to something ideal, kind of hypothetical utility, which would happen if all total income would be spread equally. So in these terms of like, if everybody is equal, we see what is the utility. Yeah, what is the utility gained by the nation? And then we could see like how much of this total utility is lost due to inequality. Yeah, so then we could see like, all right, if resources would be split equally, our utility of the whole nation would be higher by this and that amount of utility, like whatever you use it for its measure. Yeah, and that's kind of a nice thing, because you remember in the beginning we said that maybe if we spread resources equally, this is kind of benefits everybody. Yeah, while when you have like super rich people, they themselves don't really get much value from it. Yeah, like if you're millionaire, yeah, like getting from millionaire to billionaire, it's kind of not so much of a wow effect as getting from poor person to kind of person who can eat every day. Yeah, like there you can really appreciate it. And that's why the interpretation of Atkinson index is, for example, if it's equal to 0.4, it tells us that 40% of total income is wasted due to inequality. Yeah, and if income, alternatively, we can read it as if income were equally distributed, we would need only 60% of the total national income to reach the same level of this aggregate utility. So it basically tells us that rich being that rich actually don't enjoy it as much as poor kind of suffer from being poor. And if we redistributed money, redistributed income, we would see that this is actually yeah, and yeah, this is it. And if you can redistribute money, you'll see how people would benefit from it. How it's calculated. So it's again the class of indicators. In generally, this is the formula. So this epsilon is the parameter. Yeah, it's called like the degree of inequality aversion. So basically how strongly we don't like inequality. Yeah, this epsilon shouldn't be equal to 1. And of course, if this epsilon is higher, it means we're more concerned with the bottom of distribution. And if epsilon is small, we are more kind of curious about the upper tail of the distribution. Yeah, so that's kind of nice thing that you can set this epsilon to focus for different purposes. Yeah, you can focus on different groups of population which you want to analyze the most. Yeah, and besides this kind of besides these parameters, epsilons, yeah, this is what we It's super simple. Yeah. So like, what does the index indicate? Once again, it indicates the share of total utility lost due to inequality. That's the idea. What's not so cool about it? So like, first of all, like this choosing the value of epsilon, it's a very arbitrary thing. Yeah, like you basically choose it to support your message, and you can always choose that epsilon that will kind of be more suitable for the for the message you want to convey compared to other types of epsilons. So this is like kind of maybe not always objective in the sense that you can on purpose kind of deliberately choose the particular value of epsilon for your results. And at the same time, changing this epsilon can really affect these trends or country rankings, because remember, so like if it's high, we care about the bottom income distribution. If it's low, we care about the top of income distribution, and then it really matters. Yeah, like all countries have different types of inequality. Yes, like if everybody is kind of rich enough in our country and we have only competition between like two largest billionaires, that's probably one thing. However, if you have like super poor people and the inequality in the lowest part of the distribution is super high, then it's kind of another problem. And then we have to kind of find a balance when we compare those things. So this is super sensitive to this epsilon. Another thing, another index of inequality is this Theil index. It's another index of concentration. Actually, I think it was borrowed from some text science or something like this. You know, like people who analyze text and they see how many times each word is met in a text, and then they analyze it for something. And so basically, linguistics, like the kind of mathematical linguistics, somehow they created this Theil index. But again, it's like the one of the indices of concentration. What's the kind of the idea behind it is that like if something is very, very rare, so like some event is kind of unique, we value information about it a lot. So for example, if we have like in this linguistics, if I have some rare word, we kind of valued information about this word higher compared to the say articles. Yeah, like we say like every second word. Maybe it's not so interesting for us to see that. Yeah, we have this art. We use these articles. We know we use them, and it's kind of not a surprise. But something rare, some kind of completely unique, this is information which we want to keep and which we want to utilize the most. So the norm, and the norm is our prior. So like what we think about this income distribution before. And our prior, so like our kind of ideal perception of equality or inequality is population share equals income share. Yeah, this is perfect equality. And deviations from this norm, deviations from this population equals income share, this is what we use for calculation. That's how it looks like. So here we say like, all right, this is the weight of the information. So how much? So you see, like if y is significantly different from y bar, from the mean, this tells us that this is the kind of, this is the weight. So for example, if somebody is 10, say like earns 10 rubles more than the mean income in Russia. Yeah, that's not so surprising. Yeah, like 10 rubles, it's not much. It's not much. So the value of this deviation here will be very, very low. Yeah, because like 10 rubles compared to like 15,000, super tiny. Yeah, like we probably shouldn't care about these deviations that much. In both ways, yeah, like in both up or down. Kind of not something very very interesting. However, this kind of second fraction shows shows us the degree of deviation, which is normalized. Yeah, so basically it shows us by how many percent this kind of unique event outstands from the mean. And the values above the mean get higher weights, so index is always positive. Like if this I is bigger than income, so we basically care again about, so we are more sensitive to these people at the upper point of distribution, so we kind of say like, all right, if somebody is earning above the mean, this kind of pulls the whole index up. It doesn't mean that our country lives better. Yeah, like it means that our country is more unequal because these people earn above the mean. Yes. And this index is actually decomposable. So you can divide it into groups, into subgroups, and say like you can calculate tile index for each type of, for each group of population kind of separately. You can calculate for different, I don't know, ethnic groups and so on, age groups and so on and so on. So you can see this is like, you'll see it's easy to decompose. All right, this is our index. And then now we can compare them all. Like we have, today we talked about roughly 4 inequality indicators. And here we can say that like about each one of them. So percentages ratios. Yeah, what's so cool about it? It's super intuitive. It's very easy to kind of calculate, easy to interpret. And for basic analysis, it's super cool. It's kind of very easy to operate with this. You can see like our rich people, our 10 richest percent are 100 times richer than poor people. All right, that's super intuitive. That's super easy to understand. However, maybe it's not good if it's you can just ignore the medium, yeah, like the medium of the distribution, the middle of the distribution, and that's something you can do now. The Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient again is kind of easy to interpret, compare and calculate. You just need data, but the rest is kind of all right. It's middle sensitive, so it tells us actually puts like this value on the average person in the country, which is suitable for some cases. Quite often, it's a very useful thing, and it's very good for this comparing countries or distributions if you need one inequality statistic. Yeah, like you just say, like you can follow it over time. Yeah, unlike Lorentz curves, for example, yeah, which is kind of tough. You can just say, yeah, just look at this Gini coefficient, and I see kind of how it evolves over time. I can compare it between countries and so on. The other index is this Atkinson measure, and this is when we want to focus more on people kind of who are poor, yeah, like who are at the bottom tail of our inequality distribution. Like it's super intuitive. It's yeah, like it has very clear kind of methodological explanation. Yeah, what does it tell us? It tells us the share of utility lost due to inequality. That's super cool. Yeah, like we just understand what it means. How do we kind of get it? So it's has a lot of advantage. Yeah, like we understand why should we care about it, and what's kind of the real cost of this inequality. However, the one bad thing about it is that we really have to care. Like we really choose this arbitrary um, arbitrary epsilon, this parameter, which is probably something that we kind of want to normally avoid because we want to compare things which are kind of in a more objective manner. And here we choose each epsilon ourselves, and this kind of can change the whole story. And the last thing is this tile index. So tile index, it's super nice that it's decomposable. We can split it between the groups. However, sometimes it's these values, the numbers, they are not very interpretable. So if you get some number, and what does it mean? It's not really intuitive. Unlike, for example, Atkinson index or even Gini. Like just like you get a 10, and what does it mean? You don't really know. It's good for comparisons. So like when you compare it, 10 would like say 8. You can do things. And when should we use it? We should use it to basically analyze contribution of particular groups to this indicator, to this inequality process. So like then we say like, all right, we put higher value on these people, and they kind of contribute somehow to our inequality process, and so on. All right, this is it about inequality. I think now we can make a break. Actually, yeah. Now we can make a break, and let's